Hello, this is Mr. Simmons, and these are our notes for 1.1, What is Science? This is meant to be used with our guided note outline here, and these are my notes over the section, and this is for homework, and it's worth 10 points since I have built it for you, and all you have to do is listen and fill in the notes. If I move too fast, which I probably will, feel free to use the pause button. Listen to it, pause it, and then fill in the notes. So, chapter 1.1, What is Science? And here's our book. Our daily objectives are to state and explain the goals of science and describe the steps used in the scientific method. The goals of science are to investigate and understand the natural world, explain events in the natural world, and use those explanations to make useful predictions. So it's to understand the world around us. So what makes science unique? Science deals only with the natural world. Scientists collect and organize information in a careful, orderly way, and scientists propose explanations that can be tested by examining evidence. What science is and is not: science is an organized way of using evidence to learn about the natural world. So first we start out with observing and asking questions. So scientific thinking begins with observation. We do observation using our 5 senses. Observation is the process of gathering information about events or processes in a careful, orderly way. So observing generally involves using the senses. So we're going to observe and ask questions about the world around us. So to think about like a scientist, after making these observations, scientists can make inferences. An inference is a logical interpretation based on prior knowledge or experience. Inferences can help to form a hypothesis about your question. Inferring and forming a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a proposed scientific explanation for a set of observations. It's an educated guess. A hypothesis may be ruled out or confirmed through experiments. Explaining and interpreting evidence. Hypotheses are tested by performing controlled experiments. So when we design a controlled experiment, the factors that change in an experiment are called variables. There's 2 sides to these variables. There's independent variable and dependent variable, but only one variable should be changed during the experiment. If we change multiple variables, it's important that we do not do that because we're not sure what variable is having the cause and the effect. So all other variables should be kept unchanged or controlled. So if we're growing plants and we want to see how fertilizer affects plant growth, fertilizer is the only thing that should be different in all of the plant growth. Light, water, soil, plant type, all that should be the same. It should all be controlled, and the only thing we should change are types of fertilizers. So if several variables are changed in the experiment, researchers can't tell which variable is responsible for any of the results they observe. The variable that is deliberately changed is called the independent variable. This is what scientists do. Scientists, they will add a variable to the experiment, and that is called the independent variable. It is the cause, whereas the other variable, dependent variable, is called the effect. So the variable that is observed and that changes in response to the independent variable is called the dependent variable. So if you're going to graph this at some point, which we will do later on, probably in the week, the independent variable goes on the x-axis, and we want to see how our dependent variable, the y-axis, changes according to our independent variable. The information gathered from observations is called data. So we have 2 different types of data. We have quantitative. In that description, we have the word quantity as a root, and that means numbers. So we're looking for measurements. We're looking for things you can measure with different devices. Whereas qualitative is a description. It's an adjective. It describes what you see and usually can't be counted. Drawing conclusions. Scientists use experimental data as evidence to support, refute, or revise the hypothesis being tested and to draw a valid conclusion. So we have our initial observation, our hypothesis, our experiment, observations, analysis, and data. And if the hypothesis is not supported, we go back to the beginning. We have a new hypothesis, new experiment, new observation. If it is supported, we interpret it, and the final hypothesis is supported. Going back one slide or two, when we have controlled experiments, most likely there'll be one test in the experiment that does not receive the variable. It's called the control because we want to see what happens when the variable is not introduced. So if we are using plant fertilizer, we'll call that our control group, one that does not have fertilizer, so we can see if the fertilizer even helped the plant grow. So science is a way of knowing. Science is an ongoing process that involves the 4 major steps of the scientific method. This can be expanded way beyond this, but asking questions, observing, making inferences, and testing hypotheses. So we observe, we come up with a hypothesis, we experiment, and then we conclude. Science and human values. Because of the new knowledge gained through research, scientists continually revise and reevaluate their ideas. An understanding of science and the scientific approach is essential to making intelligent decisions about many important topics. And those are your notes. Once again, you should be taking those notes on the 1.1 guided notes, and you should be easily able to fill this out as you go. At the end, questions for thought. Make 5 qualitative observations of the biology classroom. If you're at home, which you probably are, you can make it about your house. So we're looking for qualitative. We're looking for observations or data that involves descriptions like hot, cold, big, small, large. We're not using numbers. And then for number 2, name 3 tools you could use to make quantitative observations of our classroom. So what do you do to find your weight? What do you do to measure things in the kitchen? What kind of things can measure the length, the height, the mass, the temperature of an object? So those would be tools that we can use to make quantitative observations. Thank you and have a good day.